in jail. But you just claim you like him. Then let me run Tupac. You don't want to hear it from Joe Blow. Hear from Tupac. Hear from Public Enemy. Or admit you just really don't want to get out there in the trenches and do the work. You just want to talk. Let me welcome our co-host as we have every Wednesday at this hour, the political contributor from TheRoot.com, as well as a Washington correspondent for the Philadelphia Tribune, veteran political strategist, Charles Ellison. How you doing, Charles?
How you doing, Reverend? It's good to be with you this afternoon.
Good to be with you. Before I get into the whole debacle around the education secretary as well as the silencing of Mrs. King's letter, there is a posting on the Root that caught my eye about the publishing of the Demos's organization's new report on asset value whiteness, understanding the racial wealth gap. And Kirsten West Savali wrote about this report that is very eye-opening because it talks about how those that talk about bootstrap, lift yourself by your bootstrap, just stay in school, that alone doesn't close the wage gap and other gaps based on race in this country. You still have to deal with social justice issues. Elaborate on that.
Right, no, you're absolutely right, Reverend. And, the Demos study enlightens us all in a really granular way about that problem. There's sort of an assumption that, with that bootstrap theory or bootstrap assertion that we're all sort of starting on a level playing field, and that could be further from the truth. That's not exactly the case. It's a very complex picture, particularly when you look at asset accumulation, educational attainment, particularly for African Americans. Even when they talk about the black middle class, it's a very complex picture, and that's somewhat of a distortion because the average black middle class family only has about $11,000 in assets compared to the average white middle class family, which has about $150,000 in assets. So when it comes to educational attainment, it's just assumed that, as soon as you get your college degree, then that should automatically enhance your ability to increase wages, to get a good job or to launch a good career. For African Americans, it's much more complex, and it's much more challenging and difficult because of all the institutional hurdles and barriers that are placed in front of us, and that's what the Demos report is showing. And actually, beyond Demos, you've had Brookings Institution at Brookings. They've been kind of doing some research about this for quite a while too. Comparing the trajectory of black college graduates compared to white college graduates. Actually, white high school graduates have better asset accumulation or better access to economic opportunities than black college graduates do. So we've been seeing these trends for quite some time. Demos, the report that Kirsten Savali highlights, does a really good job of consolidating a lot of that literature and a lot of that data that's out there. But it's not so easy for African Americans. That's not to say that we shouldn't go to college. That's just to say that when we're having this conversation, we have to be aware of those racist institutional barriers that are constantly in our way. The playing field by no means is leveled.
No, I was struck by the article because I read a book review. I talked about it on Monday's show here. I read a book review by Lawrence Otis Graham in Sunday's New York Times book review about a book written by Elizabeth Taylor, not the actress, a writer, about Malloy, who was a very upscale, pretty wealthy, well-educated black who was the Assistant Secretary of the Library of Congress in Reconstruction.
Right.
and sent his kids to Ivy League schools. There was an enclave of black elite that lived in Washington, D.C. All of them well educated, all of them had stature, all of them had pedigree, and sent their kids to Ivy League schools. And they all lost it after the Tilden Hayes Compromise, and segregation became the law of the land. And Malloy ended up with all that he had, dying in a segregated hospital and buried in a segregated cemetery. And the reason I cited it is not telling people don't be successful and well educated. You definitely want to be that. But you also have to do that wedded to continuing supporting and being part of a social justice movement,
Right.
because you can't have all of that without protecting the rights that gave you the advantage that your forefathers didn't have to get it. And the minute we start talking about, oh, you don't need all of that social justice talk, you don't need to worry about voting or even raising issues, just lift yourself by your bootstrap. The assumption is that we haven't done that before. It does not work.
Right.
You need both. You don't need one or the other. You need both. We need to be as educated as we can. We need to be as responsible and stable as we can with our monies and our families. And we need to protect rights. It's not like we have to choose between the two.
Right. No, you're absolutely right, Reverend. We need to consistently walk, towards the progress of social mobility, of personal and professional and community advancement, but we're going to have to continue to chew the gum of maintaining a very crucial social justice movement. So, we've made a lot of progress, particularly over the last 40, 50 years. That goes without saying in some respects. And we have a lot more maneuverability and flexibility now than we had as a community, as a people 50, 60 years ago. But, everything for us still hangs on a thread. We're seeing that right now with this gradual and very visible rollback or an intention to roll back such crucial issues as voting rights, for example, or folks, going or starting to discuss openly, creating a foundation for renewed social and economic inequality, right? Or even things, with respect to, the conversation or debate that we're having now with respect to education. So, you have to be involved in some form or manner, or you have to be making some sort of contribution. We really have no choice as black individuals, as black neighborhoods and communities, in some sort of movement. And, whether it's, dealing with politics or business or wealth accumulation, you have an obligation to yourself, to your family, and to the community around you to be contributing to not only the common good, but also a black common good. Because all of these rights we have, they still hang on a very thin thread. It's still very tenuous. It's still very vulnerable. A lot of things that we enjoy nowadays could be reversed. And we're already kind of seeing that kind of actively taking place as we speak.
And that's our only point. And I think that, and if we talk about, well, why don't we do what other communities do, the Irish, the Jews, all of them kept supporting their social justice movements.
Right.
All of them kept supporting. I don't know a Jewish businessman in New York. I grew up in